Welcome to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be. Join us on a journey of self-discovery, empowerment, and inspiration as we explore the world of leadership and personal growth. In each episode, we will explore the art and science of effective leadership, bringing you insights, stories, and strategies from experts and thought leaders across various industries. And now your host, Dawn Marie Bornhammer, Maisha B. Hoy, and Dr. Sharon H. Porter. Welcome back to Leading with Purpose, the podcast that's dedicated to helping you become the leader you aspire to be as you lead, empower, inspire, and achieve. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter, Editor-in-Chief of Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine.
Hi everyone, I'm Maisha B. Hoy, CEO of BSHG LLC, which manages and markets MaishaLemonadeStand.com, QBob.com, and CustomerFirstMarketing.com.
And I'm Dawn Marie Bornhammer, Founder and Chief Impact Officer for Mission Inspired Consulting.
And we would like to welcome you to today's episode, where we are thrilled to introduce our guest for this evening, Dr. Angie Kearns. She is a powerhouse of resilience, empowerment, and transformation. Dr. Angie wears many hats. She's an emotional fitness coach. She's an entrepreneur. She's an author, a teacher, a real estate maven, and above all, a dedicated mom. Her journey has been one of vulnerability, triumph, and strength. Having navigated the complexities of 2 divorces and embraced the beautiful challenges of single motherhood, Dr. Angie carved out her path as a self-employed entrepreneur, all while being hundreds of miles away from family support. Dr. Angie Kearns, we want to welcome you to Leading with Purpose podcast.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity to be here and amongst you ladies. I couldn't wait until tonight. I was sitting in here on my computer since about 5:30 for you guys to come on.
Well, we are excited. And as I read, your journey is really inspiring. I mean, you navigated some challenging experiences, man, including those 2 divorces, a single motherhood. How have those experiences shaped your approach to emotional fitness and empowerment?
Well, not being prepared for relationships, even saying relationships, not knowing how to navigate. Whenever somebody did something to offend me, I'd rather cut you off and not deal with you. I didn't know how to work my way through it. So leaving Philadelphia back in 1991, when I had a 1-year-old, I packed up my U-Haul truck, had all of my belongings on it. I had a Ford Escort on the back, and I headed to Georgia sight unseen to live with my daughter's godmother, who by the time that I hit Georgia, and her roommate let me in the home, and I had another girlfriend with me, but she told me that we could not sleep in the godmother's room. So we had to pad the floor in the roommate's room because whatever, I didn't even know what blindsided me, but starting out with there, just all types of trauma, one violation after another violation, and not knowing how to resolve it or even realize that this is not normal. I carried all of that into my marriages. So they were destined to fail because I didn't know how to forgive. I didn't know how to move on. And it was just trauma after trauma after trauma, and no one speaks of trauma where I come from. So I was blinded.
Wow. And I'm sure that you have taken all of this now, fueled your passion, and now helping others through this. I'm certain.
Absolutely. The very person that I needed, and I was really in my spirit, I was crying out for someone to help me figure out the path, someone to help me figure out what do I want to do with my life. I didn't finish college at that young age, and I had this 1-year-old, I had no career, and I had $100 in my pocket that my mother had given me the night before. But my plan was I was going to get to Georgia. Since I have a baby, I was going to collect welfare. They'll give me a check right away and food stamps, and that way I could figure out what my plan was. I thought I could buy me some time. They denied me her entire life. I never got it. And the only thing that saved me was that the purpose of me actually being able to leave Philadelphia is I had this one aunt who had all the means to spoil me and my brothers. And so she became my favorite aunt. I took on her persona. I took on her freedom. I took on the way she viewed life, the way she viewed men. And she passed away at 37. And so I no longer had her there. So here I am in my young 20s, not having a family to support me emotionally. They didn't even know they needed emotional support. We were just all blinded, and we just only thing we knew is to crack jokes. We're a very funny family, and that's all we knew, right? So I bring all of that into and being very friendly. So I've always met a whole lot of people and things like that. But so I came to Atlanta, and about a month or so, she had a policy for me of $15,000. And with that $15,000 in the next year, I opened up a daycare center so that I could take care of my daughter.
Wow. Amazing. Resilience for sure. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So everyone, full disclosure, this is another Girls Hire Girl that we are interviewing today. Candy Girls, class of 230. And so I know Angie from high school, but I don't know who she is today. And reading her social media posts and just getting to know her through that, I'm like, well, she has to be on our show. Her story is so inspiring. But we're all about entrepreneurship. We're all about pursuing our passion. We're all about making our passion our purpose. So how did you go what made you know, I guess you talked about it before, the daycare was your first step in entrepreneurship, but you just kept on going and going, and now you're in real estate. So talk about your entrepreneurship journey with us.
Oh, absolutely. So here it is. I have my little one. She inspired my entrepreneurship because I tried to work as a receptionist when I first got down here, and the type of daycare center I wanted my daughter to go to, I couldn't afford. And I didn't feel right leaving her at 3 years old, just at a babysitter. I knew that she could learn more. So that's what I said, I'm going to open up a daycare center so that I can teach her. So from 3 years old, I had daycare center. It was a group daycare home. So about 12 kids is what I started out with first. And I started teaching them pre-reading, pre-math. They were whizzes. I changed their personalities. Their mothers are like, oh, all these kids act like you now. And I just had a really, really good time. But the 12-hour shifts, what started to really wear me out. And then the building that I was in, the city actually took over the building. They tore it down, and they put a jail there. So the next thing I knew to do was to buy a house and open up the group daycare home in my basement. So I did that for many years until I got tired of the 12-hour shifts. And I said, I need to do something different. But the thing that stood out to me is when I closed on my house, I was taken advantage of. At the closing table, I was the only one that looked like me, and they did not look out for me, and I got burnt. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to go into real estate, and I'm going to make sure that my people that look like me get the same amount of quality care and protection as others. I'm going to make sure that, and the thing about it is, I wasn't the type that was like, oh, only my customers are going to win. I just believe everybody can walk away from the closing table happy. So I went from daycare to real estate. And then as my life spiral, I can't tell you how many times I have spiraled in life. But as my life spiraled and I started to say, you know what, there's a way that I could actually be happy. Like I see other people happy. And honestly, I would go to restaurants, just me and my little girl, and I would look at other couples enjoying themselves. And I said, I wonder how they think. I wonder what's going on. And so I started really becoming very intrigued with the brain. So then I said, you know what? I'm going to start jotting down my behavior patterns. So I started jotting my behavior patterns, the things that I do repeatedly that was getting on my nerves and how I was disappointing myself. I just started being really honest with myself. And the thing about it is, as a Black woman, I wasn't taught to rest. I wasn't taught to receive. I wasn't taught to reclaim, just like anyone. I just wanted to be loved and I wanted to feel special. But I had to lead myself into wholeness and to receive the love that I desired. I had to be that for myself. So, because where I come from, self-love never came up in conversations. There was no mentors to guide me to my greater self. And I said, you know what? When I start figuring this stuff out, and I started feeling better, when you start feeling better, and you see other people hurting, you want them to feel better. So everywhere you went, I don't care if they were strangers, I end up in these deep mental conversations about what they're feeling, how they're feeling, try this, do that. And that's how my journey actually started. And then when I started seeing that, this stuff is really working. And I dreamed big. I just had big, crazy, wild dreams. And I just always thought they were going to come to pass. I told my daughter when she was about 6 that we would travel the world. I didn't know that later on she would become a pilot. And actually, we started traveling the world. Everything I spoke, I tell you, those things came to pass. And so after a while, when I turn around and look at my sphere, I see that the sisters around me are hurting too. And I can't code switch, you guys. I'm not good at that. I focused on my Black women because that's who I related to the most, right? When I started focusing on helping my Black sisters, because things were just different, I just saw something different from my white girlfriends. And so I looked into the history of Black women and what they go through, and I learned that we were the most marginalized worldwide. That threw me off. Because I'm like, how are Black women most marginalized worldwide? I thought maybe it was just here in the US and a cultural thing, but it's worldwide. I looked up the word marginalized and it says insignificant. I said, Black women are the most insignificant worldwide. Now, the thing I know is that people treat you the way that they see you. The energy that you bring in the room, that's the energy that they're going to interact with, right? So worldwide, Black women are entering the room insignificantly. We are taught this thing that I call false humility. Just go in there, put your head down, do the work, come out, don't hurt nobody, protect. Everything was just based out of fear, you know? And so I sit up and I said, my sisters need to know how powerful we are. They need to know that we're trendsetters. They need to know that if you own your space, people will treat you the way that they see you. And a lot of my sisters would sit up there and they say, oh, well, white people do this or white people do that. And that wasn't my truth. I met a lot of white people that did a lot of good for me. And so then they try to say, oh, well, you were their token Black, always coming up with something. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I own my space. I walk in my power. And you can too, if you actually would take the time to be honest with yourself. Realize that you can't point the finger that you're living the life you're living because that person did this and that person did that. That person offered you an experience that you decided to react to. So you're reacting to the experience they offered. There's so many different options that you could have taken. But based on your perspective, the way you think, what you believe about yourself, your limiting beliefs, all the traumas and the violations in the past, all of those are playing in the background and you don't even know. And that's what's making you make your decision, but you want to blame the next person. So that's how I started my business, ladies.
It's so nice I love this podcast because I get to talk to people like yourself. I get to get inspired by people like yourself. And to think I was one of those people who looked at you and thought she has it all, even in high school. I remember you walk with such confidence and such joy, and to understand that part of that was coming from the facade that you were putting up because you didn't know all that, but now you're truly living who you really are, who I saw you as years ago. Yep. It just brings joy to my heart.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, again, you know me to be the funny one, and yeah, always cracking jokes. But what I also learned is the people that are the funniest are covering the most pain. We want to see everybody happy. So therefore performing is, hey, let's do it. Let's forget about the pain. We could create a good time out of nothing, and that's what my family was good at. We just create a good time out of, there was not a boring moment in our house at all. But there was a whole lot of trauma. There was a whole lot of domestic violence. There was a whole lot of, you never know what's going to happen next. Yeah, so it was rough for me. And even I remember, I was never the girl that thought about marriage. I never thought about what my wedding dress was going to feel like. I never daydreamed about any of that stuff. And then when I got about 33-ish, I realized, and which I had already been married once, but I realized that I wasn't going to submit to a man because I thought he was going to beat on me. And so I said, and it hit me. I said, wait a minute, that has never happened. Like that hadn't happened. So why? Well, let me back up. I got punched once and I took care of that ass.
People Philly.
Yes. And back then I was about it. And I took care, but that's not who I was, but you're not going to hit on me.
Right.
But that also was like, I remember sitting down after the situation and I said, I see my mother go through a whole lot to raise me. All the things that she go through, she didn't raise me to get beat on by a man, even though that's what I saw her go through. She didn't go through all of that so that I can go through the same thing.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I need to leave this man. At that time, I had his daughter, which is my oldest daughter. I had her, but I was really, it was easy for me to just leave Philadelphia. I left all of that behind. I said, I'm going to create my own world. I'm going to create something. Had no idea what would happen next. But I had this blind faith, violent faith, that I know something has to happen for me. Just because a bad day, a bad thing happens. I remember losing all my houses. I had about 11 houses in 2008. And when the market crashed, I lost every last one of them. And I was scared. I didn't know where me and my daughter were going to live. And I said, you know what? I know God didn't bring me here and say, okay, this is the end of your story. So let me just find whatever my next step is. I'm not going to try to figure out that whole staircase. I just need the next step. I just need the next meal. I just need the next phone call. And my mother always told me that if you're willing to help yourself, somebody out there is going to always be willing to help you.
Yes, Dr. Sharon, Dawn, and I can definitely talk about pivoting from difficult times and taking that next step. We all know that journey.
So I can imagine how helpful it is for you to share so authentically and vulnerably, especially for people that are seeking to be seen, maybe for the first time. I would love for you to share a little bit more about some of the mental and emotional barriers, or even spiritual barriers, I believe you even indicated, that some of your clients are facing when they come to you. I can imagine there's some patterns emerging that you're seeing amongst some of the women that you're serving.
Absolutely. So the interesting thing is, what I've learned about my Black women is that we get stuck, and we don't claim, acknowledge, or even recognize mental or emotional chaos that we're sitting in. All we know is exhaustion, anger or frustration, guilt and shame. So when I encounter women, I'm first talking to them about receiving emotional fitness coaching, they don't even think that that's a thing that they need. They're like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they think about, I might be able to say one or two things that they can actually relate to. But then when I finally get them in the class, within the first 5 minutes, they're like, whoa, wait. Because when I start showing you how your mind is firing off the same stuff, when I start showing you how you're actually creating your pain, when you're thinking, this person, we don't get along because X, Y, and Z, your perspective is what's actually creating your pain. So if I took a piece of paper, if I took a drawing, a picture, and I put it on the table, and you're sitting across the table, you're going to see that picture one way. But if you come around the other side and get a different perspective, you might see the picture totally different. And that's the same way I show women that every way you think, and you can't keep trying to have right fights, because everything you think doesn't make it right. And even though you might be right, that's not going to really lend to you developing, you opening up, you being trustworthy, you being vulnerable, the other person being vulnerable. And I teach women how to actually calm themselves, to find a pause button right in the middle of their storm. And that pause button between stimulus and response or reaction, that pause button can save a life. That pause button can save your job. That pause button can save a company. Finding that pause button, and as a leader, it's so important to find a pause button, because then that way you can actually hear. That way you can gain better perspective of how you're going to respond. Even if you need a response, sometimes it's best just to listen to what everybody else is contributing or what they're challenged with, and not try to fix everything all the time. When I was speaking to Dr. Sharon about how I worked for one company for 3 years. When I went in there, because I had been an entrepreneur my entire life, I didn't know anything about having a team. I was selling real estate. I was constantly a servant. I was always serving my customers. I didn't have to worry about passing a baton to one person or the next person. So in going to this company, I saw all the things that they were doing wrong as a new startup real estate company. And I just was like, wait a minute, that's wrong and that's illegal. You can't do that and this, that, and the other. And I was just, as a leader, just pointing out everything they were doing wrong. Now, was I right? Yes. But I was wrong when it came to teamwork. That's not the way you actually get a company's buy-in. That's not the way you. And then on top of that, I didn't give them the opportunity to learn their own lesson. They wanted to do a certain way, and I could explain what the impact may be, but I could have just been open and said, well, hey, let's just try it out. I didn't know anything about that. So these are the things that I help other women work through. And then especially when it comes to relationships with their husbands, I teach them how to get more honey off the moon. Yes, I teach women how to date and find their husband. Shucks. So if one thing I know how to do, I know how to find a husband. Okay. I'm currently married now. I'm a newlywed. Just got married in September of last year after 15 years of being single.
Well, sometimes we have to get it wrong a couple times to kind of find our way, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that you illuminated with the example of that work environment is sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And seeking to understand and remaining curious offers you the opportunity to understand that how did they even get there?
Absolutely.
Because if they ended up doing things incorrectly for whatever the reason or shortcutting, there was likely something underpinning that was a little further back. Most people don't show up ready to try to scale or cut the system, right? It's when the system wasn't, or they weren't trained properly, or there was something else that broke that down. And when you're really tired and burned out, a lot of times you take on things as part of who you are, even though that's not the case, right? And separating those things as well is part of the learning. So I love that you said it's not always that, it's the approach that you take in order to help people earn the right to have the harder conversation in those environments. I think is really powerful. And then last thing I'll reflect back to you, which I loved, was really it's just how you're being perceived and the energy in which you're bringing to the conversation relationship dynamic has everything to do with how people receive you. Those of us that are more hyper vigilant than others that don't have that emotional regulation really need to intentionally pause and intentionally create the space to reflect. Otherwise, our emotional response versus cognitive response is going to be what jumps in. And that's not always our best foot forward or our best selves, frankly.
You broke that down. Lovely. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that kind of hurt my feelings in retrospect is that I was taking a growth opportunity from my young team. How can they learn? They can't learn from me giving them all the answers. And that's what I was doing.
And it, with good intention, but our impact wasn't there. And so when we learn and we seek to understand, we can do better, which is exactly what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have noticed when you can get past the different violations that happen to you, they create the trauma, whatever it is. And we have trauma on different levels, right? But some people be like, oh girl, that's nothing. You ain't getting because I went through this. I'm like, okay, what do we have? Competitive trauma here? No, pain is pain. I don't care if it's the fact you just lost your dog and somebody else say, but I lost a whole husband. Pain is pain, So I teach women through that. And a lot of times we're so judgmental because we're sitting here fighting for our own limitations. And we don't realize that even when we're judging, we're creating more pain for ourselves. We actually think we're transferring that energy over to someone else and getting the attention off of us. But your spirit knows. And then your mind is taking it in. And then now the body is impacted by it. Because what's really important is that you have to know that you're not your mind, you're not your body, and you're not your thoughts. You are awareness. You are the spirit that is always searching and working. And whatever you put out there, slow it down, Maisha. You're not your mind, you're not your thoughts, right? You're not your thoughts. You're not your feelings. You're not your body. You are the awareness that observes what you're thinking, what you're actually doing, and the feelings that you decide that you attach to whatever that experience is. See, it's so different. We can't yuck anybody else's yum. What I call interesting may not be interesting to you. We like different music, So you and I have to, if we're going to come together, we have to have the sharing of the same meaning for the same word. And that's really important. And that's when you take a couple steps back. You allow the person to be who they are, whatever they've learned to do. And we are a summation of our past experience. Our body is a library of everything that has happened to us in the past.
Keeps the score.
Keeps the score. The body keeps the score. And so you're bringing that into relationships. But if you can recognize that I'm here now with another spirit, in their body and their flesh, they have these things locked up that they don't even realize that they're operating in a certain way. So then if I know, I'm aware that that's not who they are. That's what life programmed them to be. I now can stop taking it personal.
Leave space for possibility. It leaves space for them to have a moment where they may consider something different.
Absolutely.
Right? And both things can be true, right? And there's some duality to all of it. And I think the one other thing that I heard you say, which I thought was really beautiful, is to acknowledge there's no comparison needed when we are attempting to understand someone else's emotional state or experience. It is theirs, and what they attach to it is based on the meaning or the feeling that is attached to it in that moment.
That's correct.
But your grief and my grief, neither is bigger, better, more impactful, worse, whatever pick a word, right?
Yeah.
We don't need to label it as such. I understand to the extent I can what grief feels like because I have grieved. And that's enough of a shared understanding for us to then come together and seek to understand one another better.
That is so good. And you made me think about this one woman I was coaching, and we were doing our final session. I have 5 sessions in my one-on-one coaching, and I also have group coaching as well. But I was doing one-on-one with her, and in the 5th session, I was excited about how I was going to show her why people say Black women are angry. Because we only think of angry and what they're doing, not in her head. Yeah, y'all angry.
I know the conversation, unfortunately, is true. Go ahead.
So, and Black women don't understand the many different ways that we show anger. It could be chronic irritability. It could be condescending. So all of these things, oh, look, Maisha said, yeah, I can relate to that. There's so many things. So I'm breaking this stuff down to her, but she looked a little distant. And I turned around and I said, I think something else is plugging into you. What's going on? And she began to tell me about how a guy that she dated years ago, they stayed friends, and they just always, in her mind, they've always loved each other. He loved her, and they had a special place. And she knew he was dating someone else, but they still stayed friends with one another. She just found out that he's having a baby by this girl, and she's crushed. Her whole day is devastated. And she said, and I just been crying since yesterday, and I can't pull myself together. And look, that's when Dr. Angie get excited, because now I'm able to help her access the back of her mind to see what's really plugging in. Mm-hmm. By the time we finished that session, she realized it was her perspective that was creating her pain, and not him having the baby. It was what she was placing value on, as if he was the prize, instead of realizing he doesn't have the love she actually needs for her future, so he could never be her prize. So we couldn't finish our 5th session. We had to do a continuance. And when we did, I brought up the subject, and she forgot all about that we had the conversation. She said, oh, I hadn't thought about it since that day. So it's the way that you're perceiving a situation. If you take time to unpack your thoughts and be honest, you can lie to the next person, but don't lie to yourself. Mm-hmm. Be honest. That really hurt my feelings. You know what I mean? And so a lot of times, my sisters, we just think that angry, oh, that pissed me off. No, it hurt your feelings. And if you don't call it like it is, you're going to continue to keep yourself bound up and not be able to set yourself free and comfortable in your vulnerability and be able to open your heart up again, because you're naming it something else. You can't give your feelings a nickname. You have to say, am I angry? I'm not really angry, but something, I'm confused, or it's just a lot of things firing off at one time. Or, you just got to take the time and really figure out, what is that thing? What is the feeling that I have? I feel overlooked. I feel slighted, so I really help my Black sisters figure out, what is that feeling? Because when we respond out of shame, guilt, or anger, people don't open themselves to us. We won't feel included, because we look dangerous. We look emotionally troubled. And so therefore people step away. And then we wonder why, when we enter these rooms, we enter them insignificantly, because we don't believe that these people understand us. And it's really because we have not shown up vulnerably and in our power, in our feminine energy. Oh, I hadn't even got a chance to talk to you about the feminine energy. The feminine energy is your power as a leader. It works nonstop. If you can get comfortable in that feminine energy and understand that vulnerability is power, things would just unfold beautifully. The work becomes easy. Everything becomes a breeze. All of a sudden now you're drawing to you everything that you ever dreamed because your spirit hadn't forgotten your dreams. Things all of a sudden just starts unraveling. And when I hear the testimonies and the people call me back and they tell me what has happened, I'm blown away. I mean, it just moves me to tears because they've gotten out of the way and they've gotten in their flow. Let me tell you what the flow of feminine energy looks like. Feminine energy is like the waves of the ocean. That's what feminine energy looks like. It's the wave of the ocean. So when you're triggered and you know you're about to go at somebody's throat, but you can't catch yourself, just remember, okay, how can I go with the wave of the ocean? Find yourself. That's where you're going to find your pause button. And you're like, I don't want to go off on this person. I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to act a fool out here. Let me find my feminine energy. Your divine feminine will save you every single time. She will calm you. So you have to think about, where is my flow? Let me find my flow. Let me find that pause button. And then the man, he is the watchtower. He's supposed to stay there, watch over you, protect you, tell you what's coming, what's going. And all he does is watch your waves. And guess what? Your waves, sometimes you're a tsunami. Sometimes you're calm. Sometimes the waves are crashing. Sometimes they're high. Sometimes they're low. But the feminine energy is just so interesting and beautiful in that way. And when a woman operates in that, that man finds her irresistible. That's what I teach my women in this coaching session. Life becomes easy. There's nothing to fight.
No, it's a beautiful message, and it's good for a good takeaway for all of our listeners to just be reminded that you still have that choice and that space in between of how you show up. Because when you witness someone stand in their power, you know it. You can feel it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's true. You're welcome. Yeah, we look deep within, and then you just feel safe, and you're going to get grace, and you're going to get love, and you're going to be able to give it to yourself, and you're going to give it to others. I tell you what, it's 5 sessions, but after the first session, and I'm not here to sell the coaching session. I really just want women to know that life can be easier, right? But after the first session, you guys, your life shifts already after one session. There's so much value in it. And I didn't know that it was going to work at first. The first time I did a group session. And then when I saw that the first session, people came in, I mean, they did not want to miss. They didn't care what was going on in their life. They were shutting it down. Nobody was going to interrupt. Everybody came on time. And then if we went a little over, nobody wanted to hang up, and it was just so good. But one of the husbands, after his wife's second week, he texted me. He said, I don't know what you're doing, but it's working.
Oh, wow.
And they hadn't had honey on the moon in a long time.
I love that. I love that. And ladies, I will just open the floor for any other questions for Dr. Angie. She has given us so much information, and I can definitely see how your coaching sessions really uplift women, because I love the lead while being soft. That I love that.
Yes. So my daughter, she told me, her being a captain, this woman said to her, she's been a first officer for a long time, but she's an older woman and she's about to retire. She said to her, and had been there many years. So she said, you know what I love about you? She said, you don't try to act masculine in doing your job. She said, you're always very feminine. And I taught my daughter from the time she was training, and she's in there. A lot of people had a lot of things to say about what they thought she should do and how she should show up in a room and spaces with the men. And I told her, I said, listen, you'll get more done if you stay your authentic self. Yeah. And it's made life a lot easier.
I love that. Dawn, do you have another question for Dr. Angie?
I would just love if you could expound upon your vision for the ripple effect that's possible when working with these individual women who obviously occupy space in different places and have families and show up in businesses. What is the ripple effect you hope by working with individuals?
Oh, that's a great question. So there's so many things that I don't even have to hope. I just tell you what I have seen happen. Mm-hmm. So I have this one woman, she had a clothing line, and a lot of things just wasn't happening for her. She had it's called Yacht Club Access. And after working with me, all of a sudden she had hotels coming, asking her to put her clothing in their store. She had Bloomingdale. She had an appointment with Walmart. And then what she told me, she said, everything that you teach as far as who we are, as the spirit of who we are and how we can walk in that confidence and the flow of it. She said, Angie, it's working. It's working. She's like, she's a friend of mine. So she calls me Angie. She says, Angie, it's working. It's working. She's, oh my gosh, I can't believe what happened to me. Your spirit will actually unpack all the things that you desire on the inside. There's no work to do. I get you to actually get into a space to imagine, what does that future feel like? You already know what you want, but we always waiting for this thing to happen before we feel it. And I help you to actually, get into the feeling of it. Like, let's really, really make an imprint on the inside of us, because when we get into the feeling of what that future self look like, what it looks like to be healed, what it likes to be whole. I remember saying I couldn't wait till I was 40 years old because I wasn't going to care about people's opinion anymore, right? And I already knew what that feeling felt like. Whatever it is that you really want to accomplish, what are you going to feel like when that thing actually happens? And then when you get to that feeling, I'm like, tell me what your hair looks like. Tell me what kind of clothing you have on. Like, I really get you to get in there. Now you have now stepped into your future self. And that feeling has now locked in and has raised your vibration so high that whatever it is that you're trying to manifest has now sped up. You can pull it from the unseen realm into the seen realm by actually feeling joyous about that. So now you have to take your time to remember that you're happy about what's coming. So no matter what's coming in your path, no matter what comes, what goes, your manifestation is on the way. It doesn't matter what you're losing. All of a sudden now the car has a flat. It's okay. It's totally okay, because you already said that you wanted a Range Rover and that's on its way. Let me go ahead and fix this flat. Keep going, staying in your joy, keeping that vibration up. So I really, really work on women to know how to stay in that higher vibration and that joy, and knowing that, all is well. And we do a lot of meditation. And when you come out of the meditation, you're just put together differently. You realize there's no fight here. Everything is on ease, ease, ease. And I love it when I take time to pray for people and they're going through a healing. My favorite word is restore, restore, restore.
And the opportunity to be a witness to someone who moves through the world like that is what creates that ripple effect. It creates that vision for what's possible. Oftentimes we say things. There are some people that will say, I'll see it when I believe it, right? Or I believe it when I see it. Mm-hmm. And you get to choose which one feels aligned for you. But when you walk that out, and there are daughters and nieces and nephews and other people witnessing that, they see it as possible for them too. And that's that ripple effect that you're creating through your work. So
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. I love the way you broke that down. Yes. And, one time my daughter and I, we were doing an interview, and they asked her a question. Can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something of like, how did you know that you could actually become a pilot? It was something like that. Like, with all the things that's in the way between, the conception of the thought and you actually becoming a pilot, like, how did you stay focused on that? And she said, well, my mom never told me that I couldn't. I never told her she couldn't. I always knew that she could. And I always knew. And I'm telling you, we had nothing. When by the time she went to college, I was telling Dr. Sharon that in 2008, I told you guys that I lost all these houses, and I stacked up these houses to have enough passive income to take care of my daughter's aviation fees for college. Well, by the time she went to college, I had nothing. I lost the house that we were living in. I lost the car. I lost everything, even including the income. I did not know where my babies were going to live the next month. But I tell you what, I knew that wasn't the end of the story. So I found out what my next step was. And so in that, my daughter knows you only need the next step. The rest of it will come. And it did. And it did. And we just never gave up. We had to do some things that weren't conventional. Say, for instance, I was waking up 5 o'clock in the morning. I was putting out signs on the side of the road saying, we fix gutters. I don't fix gutters. I don't climb up the ladders. What I did was I created me a side hustle because I didn't have any real estate. I had to figure out something. And that was my next step. We fix gutters. And I turned around and then I had this little young guy. He just said, pay him $100 a day. I did the marketing, got a whole bunch of people, and I would just drop him off and he would fix the gutters and I would take him home. I bought a pickup truck. I mean, I'll tell you guys, the journey has been long, but the thing about it is I just never stop creating. Even when you have nothing, I always tell you have something in your pocket right now and they'll get you to your next level. You have everything you need to get you to your next level, even though it looks like you have nothing. And
that's the gift that living from the inside out offers you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Dawn, you're so good. You can hang anytime.
Dawn is the best.
Yes. Inside out. Absolutely. Yes.
Wow. This has been something, Dr. Angie. Absolutely amazing. You must give your contact information. Where can our audience connect with you? Where can they follow you? And where they can learn more about everything that you do?
Okay, so I have 5 books, you guys.
Yes.
If you actually push that QR code, you'll see the whole list of my books. I also have one that my baby girl wrote. It's hard to see here.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Aubrey's First Flight. It's about my daughter when she was 16, when she flew the plane for the first time by herself, right? So all my books are on that QR code, and that's my website. It's angiekearns.com, AngieKearns. But that QR code will take you right to my website. You'll find me there and all of my handles. Prosperity Queen on all platforms.
Prosperity Queen. What a wonderful, impactful show. And I feel like a broken record because I say that each and every time. But when I tell you how impactful this episode was for me personally, and I'm sure Dawn and Maisha can attest to that as well.
Fantastic.
Beautiful conversation.
Absolutely. And to our audience, I know you had to get something out of this episode. So we thank you for joining us for this wonderful episode of Leading with Purpose. Definitely, we want you to make sure you connect with Dr. Angie should you need her services. So thank you again for joining us. I am Dr. Sharon H. Porter.
I am Maisha Boy, and I'm going to own my space.
Right. And I'm Dawn Marie Bornheimer. As you navigate your leadership journey, remember that leading with purpose is not just a philosophy, but it's a commitment to making a positive impact.
Continue to empower, inspire, and achieve.
And if you enjoyed today's episode like we did, please share it with your network. And don't forget to subscribe so you will never miss an opportunity to explore the intersection of leadership and purpose.
And until next time, lead with passion.
Lead with a positive intention.
And by all means, continue to lead with purpose. Thank you for joining the Leading with Purpose podcast. Please join us every Monday for a new episode.